Welcome to the November 13th edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web-exclusive production here on Channel 12. Let's get a quick take on the Denver City Council approving the $1.8 billion operating budget for 2016 in a 10-0 vote this week. Reform efforts for the Sheriff's Office, affordable housing project subsidies, and money for 44 police recruits were included in the budget. Patty Calhoun from Westward, there wasn't a whole lot of fighting and disconcerting conversation over the budget, but there was a couple arguments here and there over police recruits and things like that. Were you surprised to see it be approved so smoothly?
Not that surprised, because let's face it, this is not as awful a budget as we've had in years past where you're cutting nonstop. What concerns me more are some of the future financial outlays that they had better get a handle on, because we haven't seen great work, for example, cost of what we're getting for our money with the Sheriff's Department, for example. They should probably put some of the money towards working with career service to figure out, can you really keep fired people fired? But I'm thinking about the huge blank check that the city has just been given for the National Western Center, which is an endless, it's a tax that is never going to end, that is going to go to the National Western Center. We still don't know the structure of who's going to run it, who's going to spend the money, who's going to oversee it, and that concerns me a lot more. So this budget seems probably pretty reasonable with the money we've got, but let's look at the money we're getting soon.
David Copel from the Advanced Institute and DU Law School. Denver is the capital of Colorado. It's the biggest city, so the budget matters. While it may not affect the roads in Littleton, how $1.8 billion gets spent in Denver is going to affect most of the folks in the metro area. What's your take?
It does, and I think almost everybody would say the Denver city government has plenty of room for improvement in terms of managing its core government services. I mean, not only just the jail managed by the sheriff, but many other things. So the question is this, when they're not doing their core that well, should they be in the business of managing housing, which they don't have to do? The problem with the affordable housing initiatives is that you're saying, okay, in some development there's going to be a set aside, so some people who get lucky get a cheap place, and that's great for them. But it's only a fraction of the need that middle class or lower middle class or poor people or even upper middle class people have to be able to find a place they can really afford to live in. And you will never get there by just these so-called affordable housing set-asides. You have to make a decision as a city that you're either going to allow growth, which will supply condos and apartments and small houses and other things at market rates that people can pay, or you're going to say we're going to shut down growth or drastically constrict it, which is the Boulder model, and that's nice for the people there. They get to keep the city they're used to, but you inevitably drive up housing prices and drive away affordability, and just saying we're going to have this little tiny creation of affordable housing so we can have, sort of our diversity quota and have some people who live in the city who aren't rich. That doesn't come close. It's a kind of tokenism that doesn't really solve the problem. So Denver's got to decide that. Do they want to be an affordable city, which means you stop micromanaging growth and thinking you're going to solve it by these tokenistic set-asides, or do we want to be like Boulder and keep our, the entire city, in a sense, as sort of this historical monument to its past? And you can choose either way, but you're never going to solve affordable housing just by these mandatory set-asides.
Ed Sealer from the Denver Business Journal. From the various smaller issues that came out, whether it be the police recruit number, that actually was an argument between the mayor and the city council, or the different projects they're hoping to do, what do you take away from it?
Well, I actually think one of the most important things they did is they actually put in some more building officials here so they could speed along what has been, we've heard, a tremendous backlog in permitting that slows businesses down. Try to open a brewery in the city within 3 months of when you say you're going to open it. That's fun. And so that's a great thing for them to do. In general, though, I think this council is less ideologically diverse than the one that it has replaced since the election. When you see something that's a 10-0 vote, I mean, you have to understand, I think that this is a pretty good outline of what needs to be done. But to the real issue that we're talking about here with affordable housing, this is simply the $1.8 billion prelude to the most interesting debate that's going to come up in 2 weeks about whether Denver is going to push ahead its construction defects reform. If they do this, they will be well, anything Denver does, it's the largest city in the state to do it. But the fact that the largest city in the state and a very democratic city in the state were to do that and to say very specifically we are doing this to bring down the cost of condos would be a huge message, not just for Denver, but for cities across the state and to the legislature. I think that's actually going to have a bigger impact than what we've seen in the budget.
Ben Gill, Public Affairs Consultant, wrap it up for us.
Well, a couple things of note this year. I mean, we saw 2 amendments, which was the first time we've had any since 2008. They both failed. One was from a friend of the show, Kevin Flynn, who was seeking $2 million to recruit more cops, and the mayor rejected that, which I found to be somewhat ironic because the mayor in 2006 voted for a similar measure that allowed the academy to recruit more cadets. And of course, in 2006, there were actually more cops, just raw numbers. There were more Denver police officers than there are today. And of course, we had a smaller population. So I thought that was an interesting move. You know, it is all sort of picking around the edges. The council doesn't really have much authority when it comes to the budget. It's all driven by the mayor's office. So to see the unanimous vote is nothing new. Even if it were more ideologically diverse, it would still have been unanimous, I believe. You know, getting to the affordable housing issue, $15 million a year for 10 years with a goal of creating 6,000 units, and we can debate the sort of economic, you know, credibility or reasonableness of that policy, but at the end of the day, their goal is to create 6,000 units. And in a city where we're seeing at least 4,000 or 5,000 people move to the metro area a month, and we're anticipating 50,000 to 60,000 people in the next 5 years, it's a drop in the bucket. So to call it tokenism, I think, is pretty nice.
That is all the time we have for Colorado Inside Out postgame this week. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.